Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1. I was 16, broke, and desperate to save for my first used car. The kind of thing that makes you say yes to babysitting in the middle of nowhere for a couple you barely know. The Marcells lived on the edge of town, in one of those old two-story houses that looks charming from the outside, but breeds a kind of quiet unease when you step inside. It sat half swallowed by tall, whispering pines and crooked shadows. Even the gravel driveway had sound, like bones shifting underfoot. They had a baby girl, Ava, just 6 months old. The kind of baby that stared too long at corners, like she was waiting for something to move. The parents, Mr. and Mrs. Marcel, were polite but distant. Before they left for their dinner party, Mr. Marcel pulled me aside and handed me a baby monitor. "She sleeps through the night," he said. "You'll probably never hear a peep, but keep this on you, just in case." I nodded, tucking the monitor into the hoodie pocket of my oversized sweatshirt. They left at exactly 9:07 p.m. I remember the time because I watched their headlights snake down the long road through the woods until they vanished like a cigarette ember snuffed out in the dark. By 10, I checked on Ava twice. She was sleeping, curled like a comma in her crib. The nursery smelled like baby powder and lavender lotion, and the only sound was the rhythmic creak of a loose shutter tapping against the side of the house. I settled into the living room, flipped through a few channels, then gave up and put on one of those made-for-TV thrillers. The baby monitor sat on the coffee table, hissing with faint white noise. It almost blended into the background, until it didn't. Around 11:30, the whisper came. Not a baby's cry, not a thump or a rustle. A whisper. S-H-H-H-H. Go to sleep. My heart stopped. The voice was low, calm, like someone was sitting right beside the crib, coaxing a child into rest. I muted the TV and leaned in. Static filled the silence for a beat. Then again, "Go to sleep, little bird." I sat frozen, every part of me tight with stillness. Then I did what every dumb teenager in horror movies does. I picked up the monitor and headed upstairs. Each step creaked under my weight. The air up there was colder, sharper. The hall was lit only by the soft yellow glow from Ava's nightlight, casting long shadows that twitched like fingers reaching across the walls. I stood outside the nursery door for a second longer than I should have. The whispering had stopped. The only sound now was that damned shutter tapping the side of the house like it wanted in. When I opened the door, Ava was in her crib, sound asleep. But the rocking chair in the corner, it was moving. Not a slow creak from a breeze or a bump. No, it was moving like someone had just stood up from it. Like the chair was settling from the weight of something or someone having just been there. I stared at it, trying to rationalize. Drafts, vibrations, earthquakes, anything. But that chair kept moving. Back and forth, back and forth. I backed out of the room, quietly, calmly, like I was trying not to wake something that wasn't asleep. Back downstairs, I grabbed the cordless phone and called Mr. Marcel. I didn't care if I sounded insane. He answered on the second ring. I told him everything about the voice on the monitor, the chair, the whispering. He didn't laugh. Instead, his voice went flat, cold. "We left the second receiver in the attic months ago," he said. "Haven't touched it since." I blinked. Wait, what? There are only two receivers. The one you have, and the one in the attic. Are you saying you heard it through the monitor? Yes. It came through clear as day. He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Get out of the house. Right now. Take Ava and go to the neighbors." That's when I heard it again. Through the monitor. Loud and sudden. "You shouldn't be here." The voice was male. Guttural. Angry. I ran. I sprinted up the stairs, heart hammering like it was trying to dig a hole through my chest. Ava was still asleep. Thank God. I scooped her up, grabbed her baby blanket, and ran down without looking back at that damned rocking chair. I didn't even put shoes on, just bolted into the freezing night, holding her tight against me. The cold bit into my skin, but all I could think about was the sound of that chair and the thing that must have been sitting in it. The neighbor, a retired nurse named Carla, let me in without question. I must have looked like hell because she didn't ask much. Just wrapped Ava in another blanket and sat me down. The Marcells arrived 20 minutes later. Mr. Marcel didn't ask questions either. He just thanked me, gave me a shaky nod, and walked out with Ava. But something stuck with me. When I handed Ava over, she wasn't crying. She was smiling. Not baby smiling, either. Not the kind that makes your heart melt. This was different. She was staring over my shoulder and smiling at something behind me. That night, back home, I couldn't sleep. The wind scratched at my windows, and every creak in the house made me twitch. Around 3:12 a.m., I sat up, sweating, and reached for my phone to distract myself. There was a notification. Monitor connected. My heart seized. I hadn't touched the app. I hadn't even downloaded it. It buzzed again. Live audio streaming. The screen turned black, then white static, then a voice. "You didn't say goodbye." I deleted the app, threw the phone across the room. But for weeks afterward, I could swear I heard static when I got too close to electronics. TVs would buzz when I entered rooms. Radios would whisper nonsense under the music. And sometimes, when I closed my eyes to sleep, I could still hear that chair creak, back and forth, as if it's still waiting for someone to come back upstairs. And sometimes, when I'm alone, I swear I hear a whisper behind me. SHHHH, go to sleep. Story 2. The Simons seemed like the kind of couple you read about in children's books. Warm smiles, knitted cardigans, and a house that always smelled like cinnamon and old paperbacks. They were kind, soft-spoken, and grateful, too grateful, for someone to watch their adopted kids, Ella and Jonah, on such short notice. I'd babysat for dozens of families over the years, but something about the Simons' house felt different. Not bad exactly, just off. The kind of feeling you get when you walk into a room and forget what you came for, then suddenly feel watched. They gave me a brief tour, kitchen, bathroom, the kids' rooms. Then we stopped at the door at the end of the hall. "This stays closed," Mr. Simon said, his voice clipped. "No exceptions." I thought he was joking at first. The door looked like any other, just older. Scratched wood, paint peeling, a rusted knob. "Old wiring," he added. "And rats." He offered a thin smile, but his eyes didn't match it. Mrs. Simon stood behind him, twisting her wedding ring like she wanted to speak, but didn't. Instead, she gave me a forced little nod and handed me their number. And then they left. The evening was quiet. The kids were polite. oddly mature for their age. Jonah, who was 6, spent most of his time drawing. Ella, who was 9, read from a picture Bible with pages that looked decades old. Around 9 p.m., we had dinner, mac and cheese with carrot sticks. The kids ate quietly, too quietly, like they were listening for something else. That's when Jonah looked up and said it. "Do you ever talk to the girl downstairs?" I blinked. "What girl?" He pointed with his fork toward the hallway. "The one who lives behind the door. She watches us eat." I tried to chuckle, but it came out hollow. "That's a weird joke." Jonah just shrugged and went back to his food. Ella didn't look up. She just whispered, "Don't talk about her." After they were in bed, the house got quiet. The kind of quiet that presses in around your ears and makes you hear your own heartbeat. I sat on the couch with a book, but couldn't focus. That door at the end of the hall kept flashing in my mind. I was trying to ignore it. I really was, but something kept pulling at me. A hum, a vibration, curiosity. I crept down the hallway. The light above the basement door flickered once, then held steady. I stood in front of it and listened. Nothing. Just as I turned to go. Knock, knock, knock. 3 soft, deliberate knocks from the other side. I stopped breathing. My skin went cold. Every muscle in my body screamed to run, but my hand moved instead up to the doorknob. And then Ella screamed. It wasn't a tantrum scream or a bad dream scream. It was the kind of scream that curdled the blood. I ran to her room, heart pounding. She was curled up in the corner, eyes wild, pointing at the wall. "She's mad you ignored her," Ella whispered. "She doesn't like being forgotten." I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I called the Simons, my hand shaking. Mr. Simons picked up after the 3rd ring. I told him what happened, about the knock, about Ella's scream. He was silent for a moment. Then he said calmly, "Go to the hallway closet." "What?" "Just do it." I hung up and found the closet. It was filled with blankets, old coats, dust. But behind them, there was a small wooden box, the kind you'd keep jewelry in. Inside was a rosary, a Bible with yellowed pages, and a photograph, black and white, frayed at the edges. It showed a girl, maybe 10, sitting in a dark corner. Her arms and ankles were chained to the wall. Her eyes were wide, black, empty, and scrawled across the bottom of the photo, in smudged ink, were the words, "Keep her locked in, always." My mouth went dry. My hands trembled as I picked up the photo. The girl's eyes, they looked just like Ella's. The Simons returned within 20 minutes. They didn't ask for an explanation, didn't even greet me. Mr. Simons took the photo, kissed it softly, then tucked it into his coat. "She was our daughter," he said. I stared at him. "What?" Mrs. Simons was crying now, silent tears falling down her face. "She died in that basement 40 years ago. Fever and fits. We didn't understand it then," she said. "We thought it was an illness." "It wasn't," Mr. Simons added. "She changed. She turned." He looked down the hall, toward the basement door. "She's still down there. Trapped, but not dead. Not really." I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't move. I was paralyzed with the knowledge that I had stood just inches away from that door, that I'd almost opened it. Mrs. Simons turned to me. "She gets stronger when she's remembered. That's why we tell everyone, don't open the door. Don't think about her. Don't speak her name." I left that house before sunrise, without asking for payment. A week later, I passed their street and saw police tape across the front porch. The house had burned down. No one survived. The official story was an electrical fire, faulty wiring in the basement. But that's not what really happened. I still see her sometimes, in reflections, in dreams, in the black spots you blink away when you stare too long at the dark. She's waiting, and she remembers me. Story 3. It was supposed to be an easy night. I've been babysitting for a while, 5, maybe 6 years. Nothing dramatic. Mostly snacks, screen time, and reminding kids to brush their teeth. But that December night, that night changed everything. It's one of those memories that clings to your brain like cobwebs in an old cellar. No matter how many times you sweep it away, it just comes back. The place was one of those perfect little cottages. You know the kind. White picket fence, candles in the windows, and wreaths on every door. The Johnsons had just moved in a month earlier, and their home still smelled like fresh paint and unpacked cardboard. A young couple, polite, stressed in that tired way new parents are. They had twins, Molly and Liam, 3 years old, full of energy, full of questions, and full of that innocent creepiness toddlers sometimes have when they say things adults don't expect. I got there around 6 p.m. Snow was already piling up outside, and the sky had that deep purple shade it only gets in winter. The fireplace was crackling. The Christmas tree lights blinked lazily in the corner, and the twins were half asleep watching a cartoon when the parents left. Everything's locked. Monitors in the kitchen. Don't worry. This place is quiet, the mom had said, pulling on her scarf. I used to play outside in the dark as a kid, the dad added with a chuckle. Back then, we didn't worry about monsters. Now, they call them strangers. I laughed, nervously. I always do that when someone jokes about strangers. They left, and for the first 2 hours, things were exactly what I'd hoped for. Peaceful. The kids had dinner. We built a fort out of couch cushions, and they were asleep by 9:30. I settled into the recliner by the fireplace with a book and my phone, the soft hum of the heater and the ticking of a wall clock keeping me company. Outside, snow blanketed the world in silence. Around midnight, Molly cried out. At first, I thought it was just a bad dream, but when I walked into their room, she was sitting up, her tiny hands clutched around her blanket, eyes wide and glassy. "He's back," she whispered. My heart knocked a little harder in my chest. "Who, sweetie?" "The window man," she said, voice trembling. He was staring again. I turned slowly to the window. Just snow, cold white, falling heavy in the yard. The porch light glowed against it, soft and golden. No footprints, no shadows, just winter. I smiled gently, knelt down beside her bed, and said what any normal adult would say in that moment. "There's no one out there, Molly. Just snow and wind." But she didn't blink. "He watches with a smile. But he doesn't blink either," she whispered. I tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and pretended that her words didn't worm their way down my spine like a drip of ice water. 10 minutes later, Liam cried out. "He's smiling now," Liam said, standing by the same window. "The window man is smiling." I felt the blood drain from my face. This time, I didn't hesitate. I walked over and looked straight out the glass. And I saw him, a face, pressed up against the window pane, too pale, eyes wide, lips curled back in a grin so sharp it looked painful. His skin seemed to shimmer, like something wet or too smooth to be real. But what paralyzed me, what truly rooted me there like a corpse, was the eyes. They didn't blink, didn't even move, just stared straight ahead into the room through the glass at me. Then, in a blink, it was gone. I grabbed the fireplace poker and yanked the door open. I stepped outside in my socks, feeling the sting of cold rip through my bones. Nothing. No one. No footprints. Just the snow, falling heavier now, erasing everything in seconds. I came back inside and locked everything. Every window, every bolt, every latch. I pushed a chair under the front doorknob. The twins had already crawled into the same bed, holding onto each other. I pulled up a chair beside them and sat, and I stayed there, wide-eyed, for the rest of the night. At 7 a.m. sharp, the Johnsons came home. I told them everything. Every creepy whisper, every frozen smile, every impossible footprint. The dad brushed it off, blamed it on stress, imagination, the isolation of winter. But the mom went pale. Her hands started to shake. And then she told me something that made my blood feel like cement in my veins. We had something happen a few years ago, she said quietly, so the kids wouldn't hear, when the twins were still crawling. Her eyes didn't leave mine. There was a man. He used to stand outside our old house at night, staring in, always smiling. We thought he was homeless or disturbed, but he never tried to break in. Just stood there, watching. I asked what happened to him. She swallowed. He vanished before the police could catch him. That's part of why we moved here. We didn't tell anyone, just in case. I stood there, stunned, half expecting her to laugh. But she didn't. She looked tired, haunted. Later that day, the dad went outside to shovel the walkway. The snow had stopped, and the backyard looked like a blank sheet of paper, untouched, except for one thing. Etched into the frost on the living room window, the one where I'd seen that face, were 4 words. Nice to see you again. I never babysat for them again. Never even went near that neighborhood. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, I still see that grin. That frozen, impossible grin. And I wonder, what happens when he stops staring from outside and finally decides to come in?